Welcome to the Thyroid Fixer podcast, where we dive deep into the world of thyroid and hormones, especially for you ladies navigating perimenopause and menopause, and really for anyone struggling with hypothyroidism. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, thyroid and hormone specialist and CEO of a global telemedicine practice where we prescribe the right thyroid treatment and bioidentical hormones to all 50 states and most of Canada, helping you become that badass human that you're meant to be. So if you're battling weight gain and hair loss, you can't lose weight no matter what you do, your energy levels are plummeting and your libido left town, then you're in the right place and you have found your tribe. Remember, I want you to embrace every inch of that badass woman that you truly are. So if you're ready to dive in and fix things, let's get started. So did you ever try talking to a man about your health issues and how'd that go for you? They just don't get it. But that's not the case with my friend Cash. Cash actually found it so frustrating that there was not enough research on women's health compared to men's health. So he changed that with his company. He completed thousands of studies on women, which included genetic testing, where these women learn the ins and outs of their personal DNA. And then they took that genetic blueprint and they found personalized solutions for themselves. So that gave them so much relief. I mean, imagine knowing exactly which genes in your body influence your hormonal fluctuations, and then understanding how you can optimize your thyroid so you no longer have to be reactive to all the toxins in our environment. So I am partnering with Kashif Kahn Wednesday, October 9th for a free live webinar. He is going to reveal how genetic testing can fix your thyroid problems through the power of your unique DNA. So if you're sick of all the symptoms, the brain fog, the weight, all of that, then gather this piece of information and apply it to you. It's free. So sign up at hackmydna.com/Amy. So that's hackmydna.com/AMIE. That way you can register and you can join us live. It's going to be an amazing free masterclass. So you can dive more into how your genetics and your DNA affect your entire body, including your thyroid and your hormones. So I'm at a conference, standing on my feet all day long, in heels, on concrete, talking to people. I'm exhausted. So I decided to take a little walk around this conference. And I find this company, Align. They have these mats out on massage tables. And I start talking to them. I'm like, what are these mats? You know, I've heard of PMF and all of that. She's like, no. These mats are going to actually shift your nervous system. I was like, well, that's great because right now I'm wigged out, stressed out. I'm exhausted. My back hurts. My feet hurt. My legs hurt. Everything hurts. I can't focus anymore. I can't hold another conversation. She's like, go ahead and lay down. So I lay down. And I figure, if anything, I'm just going to doze off maybe for a little bit. But I kid you not, 15 maybe it was 10. I don't know. Time flew. 10, 15 minutes later, I get up. And I just start laughing. I'm like, wait a minute. I feel completely different. Like I feel like I just got 8 hours of sleep. What's going on? And she's laughing and she's explaining this Align mat. And that's exactly what it does. Is it realigns you. So the technology in this mat is like nothing else you will find. It uses infrared heat. It helps to relax the tissues. It promotes actually cellular detoxification. So that's cool. We're clearing out our cells. EMF free, totally easy. You just throw it on your bed, on the floor, whatever you want to do. You can adjust the heat. You can adjust the frequencies based on what you need. But anything from calming the mind to improving your mental clarity and cognition. That's what I needed. I needed to wake up and be able to think and speak. It reduces recovery time, so muscle repair from injury, and obviously it helped me big time. I wasn't injured, but man, I was hurting. And then it improves blood flow, tissue oxygenation that had to have been happening that day because I literally felt like a new woman. The really unique thing is it enhances nutrient absorption. So anyone that is struggling with getting their nutrients, maybe you have gut issues or whatever, this is going to help. It's going to help those nutrients absorb into the cell. And then it also accelerates cellular regeneration. So hello, anti-aging. It's an all-in-one mat So you don't waste your money on this mat and this PMF, and you just get the Align mat, and it literally does everything. It will change your life. I use mine every day now, every day. So you're going to go to myalignmat.com. So that's myalignmat.com. You're going to use the code Dr. Amy. I always give you guys a code because they give me a code for $100 off. So going to save you boatloads of money. And again, you're going to thank me for this one too, because that's what I do. I find you really, really cool stuff and I try it and I bring you only the good stuff that works. You know, the topic of genetics and gene expression and really how it's affecting your entire body, but specifically your thyroid, your hormones, your ability to lose weight, potentially diseases of aging, cancer, Alzheimer's. It's really, really a hot topic in my Facebook group and what I'm hearing from you as my listeners. So instead of tackling this myself, I wanted to bring in an expert so we could deep dive into those specific areas and really get you answers as to what you need to be looking for, what you might need to be testing, what you might need to be thinking about as you're getting more optimized. And especially if you're on that path of optimization and you're hitting some roadblocks and you're like, why isn't this happening? It's happening for everyone else. Susie Q over there is losing weight. She's feeling better. Her brain's lighting up. What's up with mine? Well, this might be your answer today. I have brought on the legendary, and if you haven't heard of Kashif Kahn, then your head's been in the sand. So we're going to bring you out of the sand. He is a legend in the whole DNA space. His knowledge is just off the charts. So I'm super excited to have him as a guest on the show. So Cash, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. That's a lot of pressure.
Well, you know what? I've heard you before, so I think you're pretty good at performing. Now, this is going to be just a great conversation. It's one, like I said, that, you know, in 450 episodes, we haven't dove deep into it. We brushed the surface of genetics. We went over my gene report, but we haven't really focused on these points that my audience has been asking about. So that's why I wanted to deep dive with you, because you know what you're talking about. I'm going to start off by saying, how in the world did you get into the world of genetics, epigenetics, DNA?
Not from the regular path that you would expect. So typically, and this goes back to the thing you were saying, like, you know, you dove into this before, but didn't really find what you were looking for, right?
Right.
And that's what I found. And so the genetic world, PhD, academia, etc., really believes that genetics is this gene equals that, this gene equals that. And so I myself was sick, didn't come from the space. I actually ran a technology startup company. So I used to help startup companies grow as a marketer, legal, accounting. I did everything they needed that they didn't even know they needed, right? And I got really sick. And in that journey of being sick, I, for the first time, found out what doctors actually did in at least in Toronto, in Canada, where I live, which is, here's what your disease is called, diagnose, and here's the pill, prescription, diagnose and prescribe. And my question was, why did I get sick? I had eczema so bad that I literally couldn't open my left eye. It was sealed shut and it was all over my face. Yeah. I had psoriasis so nasty that I had to remember, like, muscle memory to keep my palms flat, because when I would grasp a fist, my knuckles would bleed. Gut issues, horrible gut issues, migraines, which were really from the gut, depression, bunch of stuff, 5 pills, 5 problems. Nobody could tell me why. And for me, that didn't make sense. And my question to them was, if these pills were the answer, why do I need to keep taking them? I didn't have this stuff before. And all of a sudden, all these things at once, there's a little too much serendipity there, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started to dive into my functional health through guides, through functional medicine practitioners, people like yourself that truly understand how the body works, homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine. Eventually, I landed on genetics, and there were some big aha moments for me, like certain genes that were just entirely missing, didn't even have them. And for a simple example, maybe I'll close it on this, is there's a gene called GSTM1, which is a primary first line defense of the gut. So as we eat all the pesticides, plastics, you know, whatever's coming along with that food, we're meant through the glutathione pathway, this antioxidant the body produces, to remove those and not cause gut inflammation, not have IBS and Crohn's and all these issues. I don't have that gene, missing. So this biological function doesn't happen in my body. But when I thought I was eating healthy, meaning I was eating a lot of Mediterranean foods, hummus, meat, and salads, I thought I was doing a good job. I didn't realize that in Canada where I live, there's a chemical used to dry chickpeas so that they can turn the yields around faster because we have a long winter. And that chemical is a potent toxin that, when studied in the average population, no problem because most people aren't missing this gene. So that one thing, major aha moment, and that's when I went down a rabbit hole, walked away from my business, gave it to my business partner, and said, I found what I have to focus on the rest of my life. That's what I did.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, like so many of us in this health space, we've come through a pain to purpose story. You know, you're dealing with your
Yeah.
own health crisis, and that leads you to help yourself and then open it up and realize, oh my gosh, other people need help as well. So what do you do now for you based on that, Gene? And I'm sure, you know, a multitude of other markers that you've examined for yourself. Have you changed your lifestyle? Do you change your supplementation? Does that
Yeah.
guide you in basically how to live your life day to day?
First, there was like a purge. There was all this stuff that I was doing that I didn't need to do. Certain supplements, certain exercise. I was over exercising based on my genetics. I actually need to do less, right? So there's this purge and then a rebuild. And the rebuild was, what biology is broken? Step one. Doesn't matter what the problems are, doesn't matter what my pain points are. What systems are failing? Forget about the symptoms. And if I support those are the hubs through which all symptoms come from. So if I fix my gut, which was one of the big things I had to do, the migraines, the eczema, the psoriasis, the autoimmunity, and the inflammation were both coming from the gut,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know that so well because that's a big part of what you do, right?
Right. Right.
So having said all that, I started to support the biology, some things through supplementation. It's really three buckets. Your DNA will tell you the exact instruction that your cells are receiving to do a job. From making hormones to clearing toxins, here's how you do the job. The instruction is clear. Now, if you know that, when it comes to environment, nutrition, and lifestyle, the choices you have to make, the habits you form, you know exactly what they should be. So you're not born with arthritis or dementia or cardiovascular disease. They happen 50 plus typically because your unique genetics combined with your habits equal that net total problem. So what I learned is, here's the things that if I were to do them uniquely to me will make me sick. And here's the things that if I were to do them, I could reverse my biological age, which I did. At the time that I was sick, I was 38, biologically tested as 43. So I was 5 years older than myself, sick on the inside. I'm now 44, and my most recent biological testing shows I'm 33. So not only did I get those wasted years back, pause the regression, I improved and got back some life, right? So anyways, it's a combination of, here's my DNA, here's the broken biology. Now, what should my habits be?
And really, I mean, what it sounds like to me is, number one, you and all of us could be doing something that we believe is healthy or that we've been taught is healthy. You know, take these supplements, of course, exercise, you know, push yourself. You're a type A, let's do some CrossFit. And that was actually working against you. And so I'm thinking about all these people listening, and even my patients that I'm working with who are hitting roadblocks, stumbling
Yeah.
blocks, where they're just not progressing. They might be doing something that we all even believe in the health space. Like, well, of course you take vitamin D and vitamin E and omegas and what, you know, are the in general good for you supplements or even lifestyle modifications like exercise, but it's working against them because of
Yeah.
their specific makeup.
Yeah, and let me give you an example of that just to make, because people think, how could exercise hurt me? What I do now is I work with a lot of sort of celebrity VIP type clients that I'm on a retainer and they call me like, hey, I'm flying to Japan, not going to sleep tonight, check my DNA, what do I do? So the crazy things like that, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
the
cool.
value of their work is that this is very valuable information for them. So there's a tennis player that I was working with. He's retired now, but if I were to say the name, you know, Wimbledon, US Open, everybody knows who this person is, right?
Mhm.
And his challenge was, young person, imagine Wimbledon age, you're not in your 60s, right? And this guy had a cholesterol issue. He's like, I don't get it. I'm eating everything right. I have the best doctors, best trainers. I'm not doing anything wrong. Why do I have a cholesterol issue? So I dove into his DNA, and here's what I found. There's genes around mitochondrial function. So your mitochondria are constantly taking in oxygen that you breathe, nutrition in your blood from what you ate, combining those to make energy at the cell, the mitochondria in the cell. So in that process of making energy, the oxygen that was used as fuel produces a byproduct of smoke called an oxidant. The oxidant is the outcome of using oxygen as fuel, which is a free radical, a toxin, inflammatory in nature. So there's genes around the efficiency of this process, and he didn't have good genes there. Now, there's a second gene that once you make the oxidant, removes it, gets it out of your system, pee it out, poop it out, sweat it out. Your liver gets to work. He also was not doing well there. Now, fast forward, there's genes around cardiovascular hardware. I can actually take, for example, the arteries and look at the genes that determine if I were to splice an artery, the inner lining that the blood actually touches is called the endothelium, right? It's the endothelial lining, which is all over all your vasculature. What quality is it? Is it titanium, can take a beating, or is it paper thin, highly prone to inflammation? And he had the worst quality endothelium. Now take this profile, bad cardiovascular hardware, doesn't deal well with oxidation, doesn't clear the oxidation, playing tennis every day since he was like 5 years old, running, breathing, overloading himself in oxidative stress.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that he thought was amazing for him, his wiring wasn't wired for cardiovascular activity. It caused an overload of oxidation, an overload of that oxidant free radical that he couldn't clear on this bad hardware, causing inflammation. What is the body's response to inflammation in the endothelial? It actually sends cholesterol as a hormone to fix it.
Okay.
And then the cholesterol, yeah, that's what happened. The cholesterol goes there to sort of like a Vaseline, smooth things out. And when the cholesterol molecule meets the free radical that caused the inflammation, it also gets damaged. It also gets oxidized. And then it starts to build up and build up. And then all of a sudden a doctor says you have a cholesterol problem because they're responding to a marker in your blood, a symptom, not asking why did it happen. So this guy who was about to quit his world-renowned profile sport, right, what he was doing,
Mm-hmm.
it was simple. His training had to change. We had to add antioxidant support. We had to add endothelial support, which these things are all easy to do. You just need to know what to do. And all of a sudden, guess what? He doesn't have a cholesterol problem, right? Like literally, there wasn't a disease.
Right.
There wasn't anything that needed to be named. It was a reaction that his body was trying to protect him with, that because it eventually leads to plaque, we have to name as a disease.
And how many people would have been put on a statin
Yep.
for that elevated cholesterol instead
Yep.
of digging a little bit deeper, figuring out exactly what you found with him and just tweaking a couple things instead of going on this horrific medication that basically destroys your body from the inside out?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly why he called, because he was aware of the correlation between statins and dementia,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he said, I don't want this. What do I do? And he was young.
Yeah.
So we had to dive in and we figured it out.
Okay, so that was his genetics. Now, I also hear the term functional genomics. And
Yeah.
what's the difference between those two?
So what we just described is a functional approach. Genetics is what people think genetics is, which is you have an 80% risk of dementia. You have an 80% risk of breast cancer. You have an 80% risk. So he would have been told that based on his DNA, this gene around the endothelial, research shows you have an 80% chance of getting heart disease. Then what? Like you've given him the anxiety that will cause the cardiovascular disease, right?
Right.
The stress alone. So functional is just like medicine. What I experienced with the doctor was, here's what your disease is called, and here's what we prescribe. Functional medicine is, why did you get sick? Root cause.
Right.
Right? We're not concerned about condition. We're concerned about what did you do wrong, your habits that form this condition. Same thing is true of genetics. Genetics, for the most part, is still, you got a propensity for this, risk of that, versus what we just described with this tennis player's experience was functional. We actually didn't care about the condition or the cholesterolemia. We're trying to find the broken biology, fortify it, and then the condition resolves itself.
Oh, this is perfect, because now this is making me think about medicine and functional medicine, right? So we have medicine would be the same as genetics. And a lot of people react and respond to what they're told in either by conventional medicine or by a genetic test. I mean, we can, the classic example is Angelina Jolie, right?
Yeah.
She found out that she had the BRCA gene, which I want to dive into with you. And she went and got a mastectomy, a double mastectomy.
Yeah.
that was a very, in my opinion, knee-jerk reaction to learning about her genetics, where functional genomics would have went deeper and said, Angelina, keep your breasts for right now. Let's dive a little bit deeper and control that gene from expressing itself. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of genetics versus functional genomics. Genetics is literally, it was called the Angelina Jolie effect, where nationwide women were getting tested and cutting their breasts off. And now today, young women are being told to cut their fallopian tubes out. Like we are in 2024 with the highest healthcare budget the universe has ever seen, $4.3 trillion a year, and we still have to chop parts of our body off as healthcare,
Right.
right? How is that the answer? So BRCA gene. Women get scared when they hear this. Like, I don't want the BRCA gene.
Right.
The doctor who's telling the woman that because of this gene, you have to cut your breast off. What does that gene do? They probably can't answer the question, because if they could, they wouldn't come to that conclusion. So what does BRCA do? BRCA is a tumor suppressor. It's supposed to fix cancer. It also fixes DNA damage. It also fixes cellular inflammation. It's a repair tool. So what we're really saying is the women that die from breast cancer more likely had a bad version of BRCA because they weren't able to recover effectively. But that still didn't tell us why they got cancer. And if you go cut your breasts off, what about the rest of your body? Like if you have risk of brain cancer, you're going to cut your brain out, right? You have to work on it. So what is the work? The work is, here's the functional answer. Some women genetically, there's this gene called CYP19A1 that aromatizes your testosterone into estrogen. You make estrogen from that gene. Some women have an ultra fast version. So they're making far too much estrogen. They're what we call estrogen dominant. And that's step 1 of 3. Step 2 of 3, after you make that estrogen, there's 3 other gene pathways you then need to go through. And one of them is called 2-hydroxyestrogen, one is called 4, and one is called 16. 2 is beneficial and protective, protects your bone, protects your brain, good stuff. 4 and 16 cause inflammation. And you would think, well, why would my body even have those options? Because we weren't talking about a reality where everything was a hormone disruptor, and that trickle of inflammation, which actually is good for you, a little bit of just like going to the gym and tearing your muscles, good for you. Something to stress your body to fight back for is actually useful. Overloading the system is not useful. So step 1, estrogen dominant. Step 2, maybe making one of the toxic metabolites. Now you're estrogen dominant and estrogen toxic. Step 3, there's very specific detox pathways that are responsible for removing this estrogen toxin when you have too much of it. Those might not be working. So now you might have the perfect profile of estrogen dominant, toxic, broken detox pathways. Even then, not everyone with this profile gets sick. So what actually happens? 85% of North American women choose to go on a birth control pill for a decade. Top of funnel, adding more estrogen, overloading the system. How many women don't understand that between your soaps, cosmetics, shampoos, sunscreen, you're putting 500 plus chemicals a day on your body, mimicking estrogen, disrupting that flow, right? Your Teflon fortifying pan, your receipts, all these things. Then you get into menopause. And this is where the majority of breast cancer gets triggered. Not all, but the majority. You no longer have a menstrual cycle. You no longer have a monthly release of this estrogen toxin you're making, but you're still making it. And now your body gets overloaded and overwhelmed. Like, what do I do with all this stuff? There's no cycle to get it out. And so your body says, aha, I don't want my organs and my veins getting damaged. I'm going to do something intelligent. I'm going to park this stuff in fat and keep me safe. And where do women have fat? Right? It's like bum, hips, triceps, breasts. And now all of a sudden you have this monthly deposit of estrogen toxin in the breast tissue, damaging the milk ducts and glands and leading to the cellular degradation. And after all that's said and done, and a cancer tumor is finally formed, that's when BRCA is supposed to start doing something, right? At that point, BRCA is supposed to get to work and fix something. But if I test a 5-year-old girl, I could have told you this whole story, because we already know how she makes hormones, how toxic they are, how she detoxifies. So if we just fortify all this stuff, give the person the right habits. For example, if you want to go on BHRT, hormone replacement therapy, what do you actually do? How do you get precise about it to not fuel this, instead to support it? The breast cancer doesn't need to happen, is what we're saying. And if somebody has it, yes, let the doctors put the fire out, but also get into the root cause so you don't have it happen again. And you can actually solve the problem at the root cause. So this is where To your point, genetics, BRCA gene, go cut off your breast. Functional genomics, let's actually dive into all the bits of biology, see what's broken, and then we know what to support. And then it doesn't matter what version of BRCA you have.
Well, I'm going to throw in a personal story here because I've been working it out in my mind as you've been talking, and I'm not sure if there's a correlation, but I'll tell you when you can make that correlation. So I do not have the BRCA gene. However, I don't know what exact gene that I have, but on my Dutch test, when you're talking about that CYP and then the 2OH, 4OH, 16OH, I push my estrogen down the bad pathways, the 4
Right.
and the 2 and the 4. And I also was on rhythmic dosing for hormones. I started that about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Supposed to induce a cycle. I never had a cycle. So I just went and had a uterine biopsy showing abnormal cells. And now they want to remove my uterus and tubes. And I'm at a pause state where I'm stepping back going, hold on, before maybe it might result in a hysterectomy. I don't know.
Yeah.
And this might be something I need to dive in with you deeper on, but it has to have a correlation to my genes not properly detoxifying the estrogen. And I'm probably in an estrogen dominant state, even though it's not showing in my labs because the uterine lining is thickened and I'm having abnormal cells.
Yeah, this is a perfect example. Remember, blood work is what do we see right now? And without knowing why. So if your blood work is showing you're not estrogen dominant, well, what if you are getting, how old are you now, by the way?
50.
50. So you're in and around that menopause age, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the body starts to see changes, and maybe it just started making a bunch of new estrogen receptors. Like, oh, I feel like I'm not getting enough estrogen in the bone, in the brain. I need more. And then all of a sudden there's less available to measure. Or maybe because reproductive activity is changing, it's no longer free flowing to drive reproductive activity, but it's ending up in your tissue, like in your muscle, your joints. And this is why women get like stiff shoulders and inflammation, And so the interpretation is what's missing from all testing, right? And this is what you do so well, is why do people come to you? Because you know what it means.
Right.
You have the experience to know what it means, the practical experience. So most testing is, here's a range. Past this line is okay. This line is not okay. But why? Nobody's going to tell you. So we need to dig. The why is more important. So yes, this is a perfect example. If I had your DNA, I already know why that marker is showing the way it is and what to dive into, what biology may be driving all that, and then forget about all that. We just work on the broken biology itself.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm going to work with you offline one-on-one for that,
Yeah.
try to save my uterus. But no, that was just an example that came into my head as you were talking. I'm like, okay, we always think of BRCA and estrogen and breasts, but what about all the other body parts that doctors are so right to just take out? Like, we're just going to take that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hospitals don't mind surgeries, it's how they stay in business.
It's money.
Yeah. How is it possible that this was a solution when, our DNA is 250,000 years old? We've been on this planet for around 250,000 years with the same genetics, and hysterectomies weren't happening 50,000 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we survive? It was the inputs, the disruptors, the hormone disruptors, the anxiety, the stress, the traumas, like all of those things are what we need to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So yeah, I mean, along the lines of endocrine disruptors and stress, we kind of bring in thyroid and autoimmunity as we're moving through these top topics that I want to pick your brain on. Now, there's the D101, D102 gene, and my understanding of this is that shows almost like a little bit of an indicator that someone might not be great at converting their T4 to T3. I personally am T3 only. I've tried T4 over and over and over again. And as soon as I add it in, I go immediately hypo. So I've just deduced by checking all of those boxes as to what drives up reverse T3. I've kind of come to the conclusion that I must have a SNP and D101 and D102 that impairs that conversion. Now, I don't know if autoimmune is tied into that, genetics of autoimmunity preventing that SNP, but can you go a little bit deeper into, Hashimoto's autoimmune and then possibly that conversion issue?
Yeah. So that's another example of Genetics. So remember, every PhD and scientist, their mandate is to find a gene that equals a problem so that a drug can be made, right? That's
Yeah,
research dollars, that's what it's fueling.
true.
So most genetic interpretation is what causes this problem. And even though there may be a deeper understanding of biology that there's more going on than that single cause, but that deeper understanding is functional and doesn't need a drug. It needs lifestyle and environment and nutrition changes. So D101 is another example of it. There's truth. There's truth there for sure, but it's not 90% of the problem. It's 5 to 10% of the problem, but it is 90% of what can be medicated. And so that's why that problem gets the research dollars. The truth is, it's exactly what you just said. You know how I said I'm missing this gut gene, the GSTM1?
Yeah.
If you have the full copies of those genes, so I don't have this gene, I don't detoxify the gut, I have crazy inflammation if I'm not very, very careful. Then there's people that have the full. Mom and dad both gave them this gene, so they're doing really well here. That gene at the best version was expecting that you're still a cave person, where all it needed to do was once in a while you ate a moldy piece of meat or some fungus that wasn't edible and it needed to detoxify that. Not, I live in the United States and it's very challenging to not eat food that's poison, right? That's toxic in nature, whether it's the
Right.
packaging, the additives, the preservatives, the whatever it is. So now you take this prime detox environment, really good gut detox, and you keep throwing top of funnel toxic food, it becomes hyperactive. And we keep seeing over and over and over again our thyroid patients that come in have this really good gut detox because it leads to autoimmunity.
Mhm.
It leads to the body fighting itself. And then you start to get this cascade of something that is diagnosable. And then you start looking at the symptomology, which is let's look at the D101 gene, right? Because your research is done in the disease state. Sick people and disease get studied. And if you study disease, you're going to find genetic markers that are connected to the disease. If you start earlier, root cause functional, those genes don't matter as much because you're preventing the root cause as opposed to masking the problem itself. So it's another example of, yes, genetics points to these genes being a consideration, and they are. But if you deal with the root cause, you'll find that just like BRCA, it won't matter,
Yeah.
right?
So essentially, the gene markers that we see on a test gives us the propensity of what might happen, but not what is going to happen.
Yes. If you do everything wrong. And then now the question is, what is everything wrong? That's the functional part. What is my biology doing right? And what is it not doing so right? So I know what the right and wrong choices are for me. It's not the same for everybody. So if you get it right, it doesn't matter. That marker's never getting activated. If you do things wrong and you lean towards this problem, this marker is going to say, I'm going to get you to that problem a little faster. That's what's going on.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would argue
Yeah.
that most of us do things wrong. I mean, if we look at the bulk of America or the bulk of Canada, I mean, the
Yeah.
standard human being is not doing everything correctly.
Yeah.
We're doing a boatload wrong. And I mean, even you and I do here and there,
Yeah.
like, okay, I want to have the wine. I'm going to have the piece of pizza just because I want it today. And, we're not doing everything 100%. We're human, but I would say the majority of people are doing about 90% wrong to turn on those genes.
And
Yeah.
most outside of their awareness, it's like you walk into a store, you would assume that the 18,000 employees at the FDA actually do something.
Right.
So when you can buy packaged foods, you would think that it's food and not something that gives you illness, it gives you health. But so that a lot of the stuff people don't even know. But the great news is in the last few years, there's been so much learning and sharing and openness for people to accept and learn.
Mhm.
I see a major shift. So that's the good news that we're seeing.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing
Yeah.
news. Now,
Yeah.
is there an actual genetic marker for thyroid problems, or is it just that autoimmune condition, which can really turn into Hashimoto's or Crohn's or psoriasis or whatever it decides to?
So where we typically go is first the autoimmunity from the gut. Then we also look at a lot of little intricacies in the hormone pathway. So the thing we said about hormone dominance and toxicity is a
Mhm.
big one. Then we look at a process called glucuronidation, which typically is spoken of for mold removal, which it does a good job, but it also removes certain hormones that often creates a load on the thyroid. We'll often look at a system called methylation, which isn't usually directly connected to thyroid function. But so what is methylation? It is a few different things. It is essentially your anti-inflammatory response. So if you're doing things to your body that may cause inflammation in the thyroid tissue just being so sensitive, which is why it fails first and why it takes so long to recover, right, and rebuild itself. Poor methylation is going to affect this area more than other areas. It's just the hardware isn't as resilient. So we
Mhm.
always look at methylation also to support your body's innate ability to put the fire out. Methylation is also a detox function. So there's certain toxins that are not water soluble. So it's very hard for your body to pee them out and sweat them out. So a methyl group is sent, attached to the toxin, converts it into something that is water soluble. And sometimes that's the big red flag. People just don't methylate properly and convert things. And so there's certain, metals or toxins that are, again, causing inflammation, leading your body to go fight and then causing autoimmunity, right? So there isn't one single thing. Anybody that comes in with any problem, doesn't really matter what the problem is, we go through the genome beginning to end. And there isn't ever one single lever that needs to be pulled. For example, if I'm one-on-one working with somebody, I literally don't work with them until we start with anxiety and trauma first. And it doesn't matter what the problem is, right?
That's good.
Always start there. Always.
Hmm.
Because if the body's stuck in fight or flight, nothing's going to work anyway. You can add all the supplements you want and do all the treatments. Like, yes, but you're not getting the ROI. It's like 10, 20% efficacy versus 99. So you got to calm the nervous system down and get the terrain ready to heal first. So that's just an example of there isn't one single thing. We have to go through everything and get everything right. And that's when the body can be at its best.
Oh, that is so good. I'm going to go there now since you opened that door. Stress and trauma. I'm so happy you said that because I've been trying to really drive this point home with my audience and even with my patients that could be the missing piece, especially again, like I said in the beginning, if you're moving along and we're doing all the things and we're getting you optimized and you're changing your nutrition and you're doing this, you're doing that, you're supporting mineral deficiencies or any other deficiency that we have, we're building up your hormones, and then, that's at that point of time where the person says, but I'm just not losing the weight, but my energy is still dragging. You have to get into that stress and trauma. How much does that play a role in those genes that we really would like to keep suppressed expressing themselves?
So it's both ways. Plays a major role in dealing with the genes, but also there's genes that cause you to experience a trauma. And that's different for different people. And so this is why when people that are stuck trying to get unstuck, not every tool works, because for some people the trauma is intense and severe and they may not even be aware. Because here's how your body deals with trauma. Again, cave woman out in the woods, everything was good. Every day was the same. Once in a while, there was some problem. Once every few months. Otherwise, it's the same thing over and over again. Fast forward to 2024, every day you wake up as hell, right? In a nutshell, there's going to be something going on, whether news on social media, kid problem, whatever, something's happening, right? So there's a constant load on the nervous system, which is not what our genes were expecting when we were born. You were born with caveman and cavewoman genetics. So there's a gene called ADRA2B, ADRA2B, which regulates the adrenaline response. And when there's some moment of impact, bad news, good news, bomb going off, crazy social media news, adrenaline starts pumping. We know what that feels like. Sometimes, and most of the time, I would say it's below our conscious awareness. Car accident, you feel it. Something about Trump on Instagram, you might not feel it, but it still happened, right?
Right.
So now the body is designed to remember trauma very effectively through the ADRA2B adrenaline genetics. But it's one of the few epigenetic expressions that it doesn't know how to turn off. So everything else, if I eat broccoli today, my hormones are going to be a little bit different today. But if I don't eat broccoli tomorrow, my hormones go back to where they started. As long as the input is there, the expression is there. As long as the input's gone, the expression is back to baseline. Trauma is one of the few areas where it sticks. The body doesn't know how to forget. Very intentionally, because again, thinking that you're a cave person, you need to remember this to never make the mistake again. We are designed to survive. We're designed to remember, oh, that bush over there, the rustling, that might be the lion again, right? Avoid that bush. So if you have ADRA2B dysregulation, that imprint that happens may not only be intellectual, It also may be emotional. So your body literally tattoos and imprints the feeling of that trauma, and it becomes a continuation. So the next time you see that person, hear their voice, see that color, be in that location, it's as if it's happening again. Holding the grudge, the feeling for
Right.
some people. Now, for some people also, and how I learned this, by the way, is I did some work with the Navy SEALs where they were asking us, these guys are like very valuable major investment soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Why do some with the exact same training, exact same clinicians, exact same everything, some come back with trauma? And I said, well, you just answered the question because everything's exactly the same for different people. How did you expect that you would have a different result? So step one was this. We learned that some of them bound or didn't bind adrenaline effectively, and so they bound too much emotion from that impactful moment. Step two, there's a gene called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And BDNF is like a fertilizer that your brain uses to make new neurons, new neural pathways. So every time you learn a new skill, adopt a new concept that you believe is now true, your brain gives you new hardware to process that. So every skill you have has a unique part of your brain that you use to drive that skill. So if you don't do a good job of this, genetically, some people don't, it doesn't matter intelligence, whatever. There's just a bit of a lag in learning new things. That means that the new thing that happened has a lot of weight and meaning. There's a bit of a struggle to accept. So there's what we call a shell shock. So there's trauma.
Yep.
I imprint the feeling, and next time anything reminds me of it or makes me remember the feeling, then there's shell shock. The thing that I'm feeling has a lot of weight and meaning to it. When you combine those two things, that's the person that every time they see an email from Dr. Amy, or every time they listen to a podcast, it just makes them feel like not this again, not this again, not this again. Right. And they keep telling their nervous system problem, 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 problem. And their nervous system keeps them stuck in fight or flight. And if you're in fight or flight, you are not in rest and recovery. You can't do both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so your body thinks you're going to battle. And for a male form, for a man, that's actually beneficial. You start to get growth hormone, testosterone, etc. Go fight. In the female form, that fight or flight leads to, I need to protect the tribe, which means I need to store some fat on my body. It means I need to elevate my nervous system, be on red alert, looking for everything, which then compounds the problem even more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is why I tell most women specifically, forget about all the things we need to deal with. Can we please first resolve your nervous system so that the body's even ready to fix stuff? It's not going to take this as a threat and an email from me as a threat. It's going to take it as with grace as something that you want and seek. Yeah. So this is a big, especially post COVID, where everybody, literally everybody, went through months and months and months of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Irrespective of what you believe and about what happened in the beginning, nobody knew what was going on. Right.
Right.
Like the world is over. Is the financial markets crashing? Are my parents going to die? Am I losing my business and my job? That's how what everybody was. And that went on for months.
Mm-hmm.
And most people haven't had closure on that and haven't resolved it and haven't unwound the trauma state that they're in because of that. And so they're at this elevated nervous system level, can't heal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so impactful. And so PTSD is real. It's just, it doesn't express itself in every single person really based on their genes. Yeah.
If you have the good version of these genes, you literally are a psychopath that doesn't experience trauma, right? There's plenty of studies. There's this, I don't know if anyone here remembers, there was a genocide in Rwanda, like, I don't know, it must have been like 15 years ago. There was two tribes, they were called the Hutus and the Tutsis. And they were just fighting and killing each other and fighting each other. A major genocide, a lot of death. And these researchers were blown away because as soon as that war ended, these Hutus and Tutsis who literally as part of their battle tactics would cut the arms off at the elbows to make people economically dysfunctional. That was part of their stuff that, yeah. So you had all these people that had their arms cut off at the elbow. That was what they would do to each other. And as soon as the battle was over, these people were right next to each other in the marketplace as if nothing happened. They were playing together, working together, eating together. It was all done. Zero holding the grudge, zero trauma, zero imprinting of the emotion that that person made them feel. Because as an ethnic group, they have the really, really good version of these genes. They literally can't experience trauma. They have difficulty experiencing trauma. And so what normally would say, like, how are you even talking to that person? They don't get it. It's like, no, forgive and forget. That's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, oh my gosh. maybe you did this already, like test a whole bunch of Navy SEALs. But my
Yeah.
husband did his PhD on basically crises and how it develops a leader. And he ended up interviewing about 15 SEALs, really wanting to know what gave them that power, that fortitude to push on to even just buds, because buds training is the hardest training you could possibly go through. And,
Right.
a lot of them don't even make it. They drop out, they get injured, they ring the bell. What made these SEALs so resilient that they got through that training and continued on, obviously, to be SEAL Team
Yeah.
6 and commanders? Every single one of them had pretty significant trauma experiences as a child, from watching dad get shot. One of them actually said, I've only seen my parents sober 3 times in my life. So
Wow.
really traumatic experiences. I'm wondering if that didn't do something to their DNA to shore them up, to
Yeah.
build up their resilience.
So there's two. So that's what, remember the thing I said, that for a man, fight or flight creates a warrior, and for a woman, it creates a worrier, right?
Yeah.
That's what ends up happening, is this fight or flight literally turns you into high testosterone, high growth hormone, go fight in battle and protect everybody. Whereas for the female form, it's like stay home and protect the tribe. It's a completely different outcome, right? Completely different outcome. And when I did work with the SEALs, the one thing that I did find is there's a gene that's referred to as literally a psychopath gene, and it's referred to as also a serial killer gene. Most serial killers have this gene variant, which is how quickly do you clear your dopamine? It's a gene called MAO. And so MAO breaks down your dopamine, meaning that you become highly reward seeking. You can't get gratification or satisfaction, because the dopamine in your brain that's supposed to give you pleasure or reward, the success that you're experiencing, you can't feel it, right? It's over before it started. And that allows for the rapid decision making. It allows for the give me the bullet points. And it allows for, in the moment, to quickly shift gears and adapt. You're not stuck. So we also found that these guys that succeeded because they were able to make those decisions, pull the trigger, not be phased, come home, everything's back to normal. It's because of this gene also. So and then again, thinking functionally, it's not ever one thing. It's multiple things. And you have the perfect recipe for like what makes a SEAL.
That's so true. That is so cool. But I'm glad you brought in the ladies too, because I know a lot of my female listeners are going to be really resonating with, oh yeah, that's right. I worry, put on weight. Is there that connection with my genes? Now, you had mentioned earlier methylation, and I would be totally remiss if I did not bring in the MTHFR gene, which I have wanted to unpack on this show for a long time, because I cannot even tell you, I'm sure you understand the amount of questions I get surrounding MTHFR and the thought processes that people have around it. Well, I have MTHFR, so therefore I need to take methylation support and a bunch of folate or methylated B vitamins. Or some people will just throw in the towel and say, well, I have MTHFR, so therefore I don't methylate at all. I'm like, I don't think that's the case, but I would really like you to unpack that.
So the first step is that, going back to what we said about research earlier, researchers have a mandate to find the gene, right? The gene that does the job. And so MTHFR is the most studied, most spoken of. There's kids that clearly have autism, and I don't mean that they have autism, maybe it was caused by something, but they have the behavioral development issues that have a good MTHFR gene, and their doctor will say they don't have autism, they're just behaving poorly. Like, that's how misinterpreted it is. So first step, to be functional, a system like methylation is not a single gene. It's kind of like looking at a symphony orchestra and only listening to the saxophone and trying to make a call about how good that music sounds. It's one gene in a cascade of a whole system. And it's essentially a baton pass. So methylation is a gene does a job, passes the baton with a completed job to continue, passes the baton with a completed job, and it keeps going. And there's 7 or 8 genes in this cycle that all work together. So MTHFR is somewhat the central starring character, but there's other genes upstream and downstream that all affect the outcomes. You can have the best MTHFR, everything else sucks, doesn't mean methylation is good. You can have the worst MTHFR and everything else is great. The things you need to do are very different. So really, it does come down to what some of your patients have said around folate, folic acid. Can I actually process folic acid or not? Do I need folate? And for some people, do they need folinic acid, a very unique form, which isn't spoken of often, but you can't make that call by only looking at MTHFR. If MTHFR is broken, you then need to look at a gene called SHMT1, which works side by side next to it to know the net result. You also need to look at these genes called MTR and MTRR to understand how you're dealing with B12 and some of the B vitamins, which are all supporting methylation. You need to look at a gene called FUT2, which is part of methylation, which is, can I actually swallow my B12 and benefit from it, or do I need it sublingually under my tongue? Because my ancestors didn't eat beef, they ate goat. And so I developed this ability to absorb B12 in my mouth, not in my stomach. Then there's a gene called COMT, which often is spoken of in hormones. It's spoken of for neurochemicals, the same adrenaline that we talked about for the Navy SEALs, it gets rid of that, also gets rid of dopamine, but it's also the tail end of methylation. So methylation is like bringing all the garbage to the door, and then COMT kind of opens the door and gets it out. So you could, how many people are told your methylation is no good? Here's some supplements, go speed up your methylation, and their COMT is still slow, and there's a backlog of traffic and they feel worse. So it's kind of like, and you know this so well, it's like before detox, open up the pathways, make sure there's somewhere for the stuff to go.
Right.
And it's the same thing with methylation. If you haven't dealt with COMT first, you may create a bigger problem by over methylating in a closed door that's where there's no exit. So it sounds complicated, but I can tell you that if you, one of the things that we've done, there's 22,000 genes, and we've tried to make it simple. So in as much as this sounds complicated, because it might be the first time you're hearing it, I brought it down to like 100 genes that actually matter, that are functional, and the exact insights you need to know. So I would argue that I could talk to someone for a couple hours, and they could then probably do a better job changing someone's life than a 4-year PhD geneticist. Because I'm gonna teach them the exact insights they need to know that are functional, that drive the needle, as opposed to what does a chromosome look like and what is an allele? What does that mean? It's like, no, what's wrong and how do I fix it? That's all I need to know.
So you can actually teach someone to look at their own report and kind of start seeing the patterns and the lifestyle changes they have to make.
Yeah. And this is actually the majority of what we do. So when somebody says, hey, I need a test plus a consult, what I tell them is that's what you believe you need, because that's most of what you get. You get a Dutch test plus a consult, which I see, I understand the value. But when it's like reading your human instruction manual, you don't need to ever do this again. Your DNA is permanent. So why don't you have an in-depth understanding so that you are never needing my help or anyone else help again? You should understand that foundational, here's what works in my body, here's what doesn't work in my body. Now, every future consideration, I already know how to make the right choice. And now imagine the impact of always making the right choice. If you always did exactly what your body needed to do, how good would you feel? How healthy would you be? And so the majority of how we work with people is through like master classes and events and a deep understanding so that they get all of what they need. And then everything else they do in the future is done properly.
Well, and how much money are you going to save not throwing these random supplements because you heard it was good and you buy it? And I mean, I know you've seen this. How many of your clients have boatloads or bags or pantries of supplements? They don't know why they're taking them. They don't know if they should be taking them. By really honing in on your genetics, you can narrow down your supplement list too and actually be using things that work in your body as opposed to maybe just peeing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, what is your body actually going to absorb at what dose? And some things that might actually hurt you that you don't need. Somebody going and getting a B complex with folic acid in it with bad genetics is actually going to make them feel worse. I can't tell you how many people I've had to tell that are taking glutathione, for example, which is a great antioxidant, that their body doesn't know what to do with it. They're endogenous, like what they make, no problem. When you add it, if you don't have the right genetic instructions, then it's like it's also binding onto the minerals and nutrients and things you actually need because it's misinstructed. It doesn't know what to do. And so we have a woman that I was dealing with specifically who was deep into about 2 years into menopause, who, energy issues, typical menopause stuff. And she's like, I need my fatigue gone. I need to work on my energy and my brain fog and all that stuff. So again, I always park the symptoms. Yes, I want to know, but I'm not going to use that information in this detective work. So in the detective work is I'm just looking for the broken biology. I don't not concerned with the symptoms. So what I found was there's a gene called GSTT1, which she was missing. Just like I was missing this gut detox gene, she was missing this glutathione, a driving gene that drives internal, like head to toe glutathione activation. And she was taking 200 milligrams of liposomal glutathione every day to get her energy back. Somebody told her this is what you need to get your energy back, right? And it
Right.
was draining her. It was draining her of all her nutrients. So, not kidding you, 1 week after getting her off of glutathione, adding the correct form of B12, and tweaking her diet a little bit, she was literally in tears saying, I can't believe I wasted 2 years of my life.
And it could be that simple. That is
Yeah.
crazy. That
Yeah.
is crazy. And that leads me to think about all the detoxes that people do. I mean, how many IG detox protocols are out there that people buy into and then they don't feel any better because there might be something in their genetics just not allowing them to detox, or that particular detox protocol has glutathione in it or anything else that might not jive with their body.
Yeah. Very consistently, we see this over and over again. Like the community that comes to you, health seekers, proactive, it's a priority. Same thing for me. So usually, like you said, that comes with trays full of supplements.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already trying, I'm already doing everything. You don't need to do everything, and the everything is too much. Let's bring it back to precision. It's bio individual, like who am I? What do I need? And not overload. You don't need more than what you need.
Right.
And that's it will hurt you.
I see this whole conversation as the missing puzzle piece. The people can have every other piece of the puzzle there and intact, and it's just not complete because of this one piece. And again, I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my patients. I'm thinking about what I hear in my Facebook group from my audience. And so we're going to do this. We're going to do an actual masterclass where we can teach people how to read their own DNA and make changes for themselves. We have to do this because I can help a lot of people, but if that puzzle piece is missing, then they're
Yeah.
not going to be able to scream it from the rooftops that, oh my God, I'm in optimization land and I feel like a rock star. And that's what I want for people. So I think that this missing puzzle piece is what we need to do and what I need to give to my audience.
Yeah, in that regard, it's like I've done master classes of this nature before, and we'll spend an entire day with a group,
Mm-hmm.
and it's people come out of it, it's like almost a spiritual experience. Like, I can't believe I spent my whole life not knowing this stuff. Like, how is every baby born not given this?
Yeah.
To just not make mistakes, and because we've made it so simple, because I don't, I'm not bragging about that. I had to do that for myself. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a PhD. I'm a guy that was sick, that no tool worked, so I had to make my own tool.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually there's a company here called Rogers in Canada where I live, which is the biggest telecom. It's like an AT&T type company, and their chief technology officer, very serious guy running a major company, said to me, because his wife had a very serious EMF, like electronic pollution sensitivity. And so we figured it out through methylation and certain detox pathways got her better. And he said to me, what you have can change the world. You need to make it easy to use. Right. Because at that time it was still doctors and PhDs, whatever. So that's what I spent the next 2 years doing, is how do I make this so easy and digestible? And I learned, first of all, it's not a test and report. It has to be an education. It has to be a deep dive. There's some back and forth in terms of people's personal environment, nutrition, etc. There has to be some ability for people to ask questions and talk to me. And we can do this in a group setting. And it truly, it's that every single person needs to do this once in their life.
Yeah.
And the other beauty is that you only need to do it once in your life. It's not like
Once.
anything better. Yeah, you do it once. You now know how your body works. You're not going to make mistakes again. You're not going to waste money on stuff that you don't need. And you're also going to do exactly what your body does need that you didn't even know you needed, and be your best possible self.
It seems like a no-brainer to me. So yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to nail down a date for the full day where people can really deep dive. And we'll do a couple other meetings for people that might not be listening here that they want to jump in on, or if they want to learn a little bit more about that. We'll post all of the details in the show notes. And of course, If you follow me on social, you'll be seeing that posted as well. We'll give you the exact days and times so you guys can jump in. But to me, it's a no-brainer. I think you'd be silly not to, because literally, I mean, again, I'm going back to the money that you can save in supplements. I know you out there. I know you're buying all the supplements. I know you're doing all the different programs, hoping that this one might be the one that works. You need the blueprint of your own body first. I mean, again, it would be like me going out and trying to build a car. I know nothing about how to build a car. I need some instructions. I can't just work with the pieces that are out there and put it together, right? I mean, no, you need your own body's blueprint.
Yeah. It's funny you say the car thing, because there was somebody I was speaking to once, a doctor, who didn't understand what we were doing. And then I saw this light bulb go off in his head. He's like, oh, so it's like if I had a Ferrari and it was amazing, but then I took it off road, and it's like I had a Jeep trying to race against a Ferrari on a racetrack. They're both great at what they do, but if I use them wrong, I'm going to break them. I said, that's exactly it.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. And so he explained it back to me while he was thinking it through.
Perfect analogy. I love it. All right, Cash. Well, thank you for giving all of this information. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's piqued my interest. It's got my brain working. And this is really something that I need and that my people need too. So we're going to do this. We're going to map this out, and we're going to do this. So everyone listening, stay tuned or check the show notes. By the time this is out, we will nail down a date and time, and you will be able to do this for yourself. I'm excited to learn more about me. So thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. It was awesome. Thank you.